Hello, and welcome to the U.S. Crime Line. I'm Annie Thompson, bringing you inside some of the most gripping and complex court cases from around the country. Today, we're diving into a few high-profile trials that have captured public attention. From chilling texts withheld in court to a poisoner's swift conviction and a perplexing case of a friend's alleged mercy killing, these are stories that challenge the boundaries of the law and human nature. Let's get right to it. Starting out of Tampa, Florida, a disturbing case involving a young woman named Brianna Moore has taken a significant turn. She's charged with aggravated manslaughter and child neglect after authorities found her newborn baby tragically discarded in a trash can inside her university dorm room. What makes this case especially unsettling are text messages that prosecutors sought to use as evidence, messages that seem to suggest a plan to kill the child. One friend's text read, "Plan A was condoms. Plan B was the pill. Plan C was to kill the kid." To which Moore allegedly responded, "Plan C is my favorite." However, in a surprising ruling, the judge decided to exclude these texts from the trial. His reasoning was that the messages didn't clearly show Moore's intent to kill, especially since it's believed she may not have even known she was pregnant when those texts were sent. The judge pointed out that these texts might only serve to paint Moore's character in a negative light, and character evidence like that generally isn't allowed in court. Now, this ruling has sparked a lot of debate. On one hand, these texts are deeply disturbing and seem to reveal a dark mindset. But legally, intent is more than just what someone says in passing or jokingly. At the time of those texts, Moore was likely only about 4 weeks pregnant and perhaps unaware of the pregnancy altogether. That makes a huge difference. If she had sent those messages while well aware of her pregnancy, the situation would be very different. In this case, the judge's decision is rooted in protecting against evidence that simply tries to prove someone's bad character rather than proving a crime. It's a fine line, but it's an important one in our justice system. Also, the defense argues that these texts were just dark jokes between friends, part of many off-color conversations they had over time. It's interesting to consider how modern technology complicates cases like this. Many of us have years of text messages, some of which might sound questionable if taken out of context. Imagine if any of those were used against you in court. It's a reminder that prosecutors have to be very careful about what they present as evidence. Another key aspect of Moore's defense is what's called a cryptic pregnancy. They claim she was either unaware or in psychological denial of being pregnant throughout. This could be seen as a mental health defense, suggesting she was not fully conscious of the reality of her situation. Whether or not jurors will be sympathetic to that remains to be seen, especially since there is other evidence, including a roommate who reportedly heard a baby crying before the child died. That's a haunting detail that could be tough to explain away. The trial was scheduled for later this month, but has been postponed without a new date. Moore continues to maintain her innocence, and will be following this case closely as it develops. Moving on from Tampa to Park City, Utah, where justice arrived swiftly for a woman found guilty of poisoning her husband. Corey Richens was convicted on all counts after jurors deliberated for just under 3 hours. The case centered on the fentanyl overdose death of her husband, Eric Richens, who was poisoned after drinking a laced Moscow Mule cocktail. This wasn't the first attempt on Eric's life. Earlier, Corey had drugged his sandwich but hadn't completed the lethal act. The motive prosecutors presented was clear: money. Corey had forged a life insurance policy in Eric's name and was desperate to escape millions of dollars in debt from a failing real estate business. Adding to the turmoil was an extramarital affair that ended after Eric's death. The defense chose not to call any witnesses, not even Corey herself. Instead, they argued that the police investigation was flawed and that Corey was unfairly targeted. Despite these claims, the evidence convinced the jury beyond a reasonable doubt. Corey even hired a ghostwriter to publish a book about grief after the police started their investigation, a move prosecutors said was suspicious. Now, 4 years have passed since Eric's death, and while it's a long time to wait for justice, the quick deliberation shows the jury was convinced. Some might think that 3 hours is too short to consider a complex case, but it can mean the opposite, that the evidence was strong and clear enough for the jury to reach a unanimous verdict confidently. Regarding Corey's decision not to testify, that was likely a smart move. Taking the stand could have exposed her to tough questioning about the affair, financial troubles, and other suspicious behavior. Her attorneys made the point that the prosecution had no direct evidence linking her to the crime, no confession, no eyewitness, just circumstantial evidence that pointed to her as the only person who benefited from Eric's death. The defense also didn't call other witnesses, which some have criticized. But when you consider who they might have called, friends who testified against her, her boyfriend at the time who also testified for the prosecution, or even her own mother who had her own issues, it's clear they didn't have much to work with. Sometimes calling witnesses who don't strengthen your case can do more harm than good. One thing to note is the defense didn't try to dispute that Eric died from fentanyl. They just argued Corey didn't put the fentanyl in his drink. The whole case boiled down to motive and circumstantial evidence, and the jury found that convincing enough. Corey Richens faces sentencing in May and will also face another trial later this year on financial crimes. We'll keep you updated on both. Heading over to Provo, Utah, another complicated case unfolds involving a nurse charged with the death of her friend. Megan Sunwall stands accused of murder after her friend Casey Lynn Terry died from a fatal dose of insulin. Megan insists Casey took her own life to end suffering from what she believed was terminal cancer. But here's the twist. Casey never had terminal cancer. She faked the illness, telling family and Megan that she was dying to get attention. Prosecutors say Megan killed Casey for a life insurance policy that didn't even exist. The case is tangled in years of text messages between the two, with Casey describing her suffering and Megan offering help. This case is really complex. How do you explain it? You have a victim who fabricated a terminal illness, a defendant who claims she was helping her friend end her pain, and prosecutors arguing murder for greed. The jury will have to decide if Megan intentionally killed Casey or if she simply helped a friend who wanted to die. The confusion here works in the defense's favor. When a jury is confused, it's less likely to convict. The prosecution has to prove every element of the crime beyond a reasonable doubt, but they may not be able to answer all the questions that arise. If Casey was faking the illness and the insurance policy, does that change the motivation? Even if Megan thought she was helping end suffering, that could still be considered murder legally. The law is clear that taking a life for any purpose can be murder, even if the intent seems compassionate. This case will be closely watched. It raises difficult questions about truth, trust, and the boundaries of mercy. That wraps up today's cases. Thank you for tuning in to the U.S. Crime Line. I'm Annie Thompson. If you have questions or thoughts you'd like to share, reach out to us on social media. We want to hear from you. Stay safe, stay informed, and we'll see you next time.